Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Know Before You Go, Northern Lights in Arctic Exploration, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eleanor Edye. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Eleanor.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much to Rob for the lovely introduction, as always. So I'm here and very excited to speak with you today about our upcoming Northern Lights and Arctic exploration season. This is something that's kicking off in about 3 weeks and is going to run through the end of March. So it's a lovely long season with lots to talk about, and hopefully we're going to answer a lot of the questions that you may have about this program. I'm one of the expedition leaders who works on this program, and I work a lot of our other Churchill seasons as well with polar bears and beluga whales. So I'm really happy to be here with you today and hopefully be able to preemptively answer a number of questions. And then, as Rob said, at the end, you're free to put any questions into that question panel, and we can answer them for you at the end of the program as well. So let's kick this off just by introducing you to Churchill. We're going to talk a little bit about Churchill, but mostly we're going to be talking about what you can expect during the trip and what you need to know before you go. So a lot of items on your packing list, for example, what to know about photo equipment, and answer those all for you. So this image here is a beautiful winter shot of downtown Churchill. And yes, if you signed up for a Northern Lights trip with us, this is where you are going. It is a small town of around 800 people. And as a small town, really on the edge of the subarctic, you get a wonderful immersion, not just into the town and its culture, but into the larger area as well. You'll be introduced to some individuals, but also to the larger landscape. And whether it's in daytime or at nighttime, I've always found, and all of our expedition leaders have always found, that Churchill is this beautiful, special, really unique place, and we all just can't wait to share its magic with you. So as I go through the webinar, I'm going to be talking about how we're going to get you to this place and what you need to have in place to have a safe and fun time while you are there. So everything you need to know from the moment you set foot in Winnipeg. And I want to start off with your arrival. So many of our guests I know are flying from the US, though we do have guests who come from other places overseas or from within Canada. Now, if you are traveling from within the US and you're traveling to Canada as an international destination, do know that there is no longer any special COVID-related paperwork or anything like that required at the border. There's no masking required on planes, because sometimes people ask if we have any COVID restrictions still in place in Canada, and the answer to that is no. So you do still need to have your passport with you on entrance and for flying. And you will often see a lot of people wearing masks on the airplanes and in the airports to reduce the risk of getting sick while traveling to your destination. But those are optional, and you can choose to mask or not while you're on Canadian airplanes. This here that you're seeing is the arrivals hall at the Winnipeg Airport. Winnipeg is an international airport where we do welcome flights from within Canada as well as flights from the US. The image that you're seeing right now looks down at the three main baggage carousels. And if you look on the left-hand side of the image, you can see an escalator coming down. If you are coming from a flight that has left a Canadian destination, for example, Calgary or Vancouver or Toronto, you will come out on that second floor there, take the escalator or the stairs down, and collect your baggage at one of those three carousels. Whichever carousel has a screen above it showing your flight number on it. And that carousel is also where you are going to meet somebody from Natural Habitat Adventures looking much like me, wearing a logo much like I'm doing, and they are going to be watching for you, and they know what flight you are on. And I'll talk about how we do that in a second. If you are, however, connecting from an international destination, and mostly this will be Minneapolis, though there are some flights that come in from Los Angeles and from Atlanta as well, direct into Winnipeg, you will come out through an international arrivals hall. And here, this is just a different angle on the same arrivals hall. We still have the 1, 2, 3 carousels there. Beyond that third carousel is where the exit is from the Canadian Customs area. So if you have arrived directly from Minneapolis, for example, you go to that international arrivals hall. It's the only way you can exit. You will go through Canadian Customs. You will collect your baggage still in that international arrivals hall. And then you will exit a set of sliding doors that take you into this space here. And that is where, again, you're going to meet somebody from Natural Habitat Adventures. Now, if you are traveling with us and you're going to the Fort Garry Hotel, which is our location that we provide for our first night in Winnipeg, we are going to pick you up no matter which day you arrive on, if you're arriving on day 1 of the trip or if you're arriving in advance of the trip. And we know when your flight arrives because in your Natural Habitat portal, there is a space for you to provide information on what flight you're taking to Winnipeg and your locator code so that we can keep up to date on your flight and be aware if your flight has changed or if the timing has changed. So don't worry if you're on a plane and it's been delayed. We will know that your plane has been delayed and we will pick you up at the appropriate time as long as you have provided us with that information in advance through the portal. If you're arriving in Winnipeg early and going to a different hotel because you've self-booked somewhere else, you'll make your own way there and then make your own way to the Fort Garry Hotel for day 1 of the program. But I know that most of our guests choose to stay at the Fort Garry Hotel if they've come in advance, and we will pick you up and transfer you from the airport to the hotel in that case, again, even if you've come in a day or multi-days earlier. Now, just to assure you that we're going to have you no matter what, we're going to be watching for you in the baggage carousel area so that you don't have to pick up your own bag. But if for whatever reason we don't see you or you don't see us in that carousel area, this here is a sculpture coming down from the ceiling in the arrivals hall of an iceberg, and it's quite big and difficult to miss. You can even see the baggage carousels behind it there. This is going to be our meeting place if you don't see somebody while you're waiting for your baggage itself. So that will be, if you don't see somebody from NatHab right away and you already have your bag, it's likely that our driver is just caught up in traffic or there's been a rerouting because of an accident somewhere. They're on their way to get you and they will meet you at that statue. So those transfers are done with us. We have a NatHab exclusive transfer to the hotel, and it's going to be with yourself if you're with any traveling partners or anybody else arriving roughly at the same time at the airport. And it will usually be with one of our shuttles with one of our drivers. Now, regardless of whether we're going to be using this vehicle here or on occasion we use taxis if there's a lot of arrivals coming at the same time, there's always going to be one of us there at the airport looking to greet you and to make your airport experience as smooth as possible. So we're going to meet you, we're going to help you with your bags, and we're going to get you on your way to the Fort Garry Hotel as soon as possible. The Fort Garry Hotel is located in downtown Winnipeg. It's about a 20-minute transfer from the Winnipeg airport. And we are going to, again, be there to meet you the moment you step down from the taxi or from the shuttle bus. And we're going to have somebody there, again, wearing one of these happily branded shirts to identify ourselves, to get you checked in as quickly as possible. We'll get you a welcome letter with details on when you're going to be meeting your guide, when you're going to be set up with gear, and provide any answers to any questions you might have about the Winnipeg area or what to do or where to eat or any interesting information like that you might have upon arriving at the Fort Garry. Now, if you've arrived in advance, you might have a lot of questions about things to do in Winnipeg, and there are things to do. There are museums, there are walking trails, there are a lot of things like art galleries that you can go check out. But even if you arrive on day 1, we're going to get you doing things right away as well. So our first scheduled activity that we do as a group is actually on day 1 of your trip, is going to be getting your gear. We provide a large amount of gear for for loan while you are in Churchill to make your experience as safe and comfortable as possible. And your gear pickup time is going to be provided to you when you reach the Fort Garry Hotel. If you need to get gear early because you want to go explore Winnipeg, that's not a problem. But that gear pickup time is also when you're going to meet your guide for the first time and have them answer any specific questions as well. Now, in case you're wondering, why do we need so much gear? What have I gotten myself into? Just have a few slides here on the temperatures that you might expect in Winnipeg and Churchill in the months that you're traveling. So we know that January tends to be our coldest month, both in Winnipeg and in Churchill. These are the average Fahrenheit highs and lows. Knowing that these are just averages, they can be quite a bit warmer and they can also be quite a bit colder. It's always worthwhile having a look at the forecast right before your trip is going to start or right before you start traveling to us to see what the forecast is for your specific week that you're going to be here. So that's our Winnipeg forecast. Here is our Churchill forecast. And as you can see, it's on average colder than Winnipeg is by quite a bit. And again, these are just averages. They can be warmer and they can be colder. If you're wondering what's happening on the ground right now, both in Winnipeg and Churchill, we've seen an above average temperature fall, where we've seen temperatures well above the averages, corresponding likely to the El Nino conditions that we've got right now. But as of this week, we have the dreaded polar vortex making its way in. So we're going to start to see temperatures that are actually below average coming our way. So this is all to say that it just changes week by week, and it's always worthwhile having a look at the forecast for your particular trip before you leave home. So with these temperatures, which might seem daunting to some people who perhaps haven't spent much time in the cold, what are we going to provide you with? Well, we have a long list of things that we are going to set you up with during that gear pickup time on day one. And I should say that if you are, for example, traveling from a cold area and you have gear that you're comfortable with, that you'd rather wear, you are, of course, always welcome to bring that with you and wear it. We just ask you to bring it with you, have your guide have a look at it, and we'll be able to tell you whether or not it's going to be adequate for the conditions that we're looking at this week. But on the NatHab side of things, for all of our guests, we have winter boots available. We have parkas that have a nice hood with it's a fake fur layer, and what that fur, the fake fur, does is it actually works to slow down the airflow around your face and make frostbite less likely. That's why we have it. We have insulated snow pants. We have a fleece that we're going to be providing as a loaner as well. It's a nice thick fleece that we use as a mid layer. We have thick leather mittens. We have a fleece hat, locally known as a toque. We have neck gaiters available as well. And regarding the hat and the neck gaiters, we have these, but we often find that most folks prefer to use their own. And it's not to say that we don't have good ones or anything like that, but people have differently sized heads. Hats are not quite one size fit all. So if you have one that you like, or even two that you like, I would encourage you to bring that as well. For myself, I also find that the hats we use at NatHab, they're great. They're a fleece hat. They do a good job keeping you warm, but what they don't do a good job on is keeping out the wind. And not everybody is like this, but I don't like wind on my ears. It's a thing, and I know some other people are like that. So I always make sure my hat is multi-layered and is not going to let the wind through to my ears. Neck gaiters, like I said, while we have some available, we also find that people like to bring their own, both for comfort, if it fits over your head more easily, for example, and also because when you're breathing into a gaiter for multiple hours per day, it's nice to have a fresh one to change out to in the evening while you hang up your other one to dry off while you're out. So it's good to have at least a couple of those on the go. Hand and foot warmers, we're going to have a small stockpile in Winnipeg, and we're going to have more available in Churchill so that we don't have any risk of frostbite with your hands and toes. Now, couple other quick notes before we move on here. Regarding the parka, if you're wondering, they are synthetic parkas, so there's no down in the parka for anybody who may have a down allergy. And same thing with the snow pants. They are all synthetic, no down in those layers. All right, so that is what we're providing you with. And up comes an image right away as to what you may look like when you are wearing all these layers. So you too can be ready to conquer the cold and have a great time up in Churchill. As we say in Manitoba, there's no bad weather, there's only bad gear, or if you're talking to a teenager, it's bad choices because they probably have the gear and didn't put it on. So that's what you're going to be looking like when you're up in Churchill and with all that provided gear. Now, in terms of what else to keep in mind while you're thinking about packing, in a moment, I'm going to go through a few of our packing items. But I want to talk about layering in general and some things to keep in mind while you are picking out the items that you want to bring with you. When we are dressing for the cold, we are dressing for multiple levels of cold. The cold might not be the same in the bus as it is in town, as it is in a teepee, as it is when you're out for a walk or when you're standing around outside. So while the conditions might seem similar, there's a world of difference between, say, minus 20 Fahrenheit with a wind and plus 10 Fahrenheit with no wind. Now, with this, we are going to be spending time putting on and taking off layers with a goal of not being sweaty no matter what's going on. So I personally spend a lot of time taking my outer layers off and putting them back on as necessary, knowing that I don't want sweat buildup on my parka or even on my mid layers, because that's going to make me cold later when I stop moving around so much. So your base layer, and we're going to suggest that you bring a couple sets of base layers. You'll want something like either a smart wool or a microfiber wool type of material, or something like a polypropylene, something that is going to work to wick moisture away from your skin and still be keeping you at least a little bit warm. So that's going to be your bottom layer on both your top and bottom and on your feet. So we're looking for layers on our feet as well, and we're going to want to have probably especially a polypropylene layer right next to your feet. You will be shocked how much your feet sweat and how much moisture there is in your boots every day when you take them off. So we're really going to be working to keep that moisture away from our feet. On top of our base layer, we're going to wear our mid layers. And our mid layers are going to be things that add warmth while not necessarily being any kind of a shell. So they will allow moisture to move through and will also allow airflow. So we're talking here mostly things like polar fleece or other fleece-like materials that allow that airflow while still adding warmth. Now, as I said, we are going to be providing the loan of a nice thick fleece sweater, but we do recommend that you bring an additional mid layer for your top, for your upper body as well. Something like a puffy jacket or a down jacket, depending what works for you. Your next layer up is going to be one, especially the one that we take on and off most frequently, and that is your shell layer. This often adds insulation. This will be our parka and our snow pants. So these add insulation, but they also create both a moisture barrier as well as a barrier to wind. So they're going to be the things that kind of really cuts us off from the outside environment. So that's our layering system, and your guide's going to talk more about appropriate times and what you should wear on your way to Churchill every day, depending on what the conditions are. And as mentioned, this layering system extends to our feet and also to our hands and also to our head. So on our feet, we're going to wear those polypropylene socks with another thicker layer on top, like a wool sock or like another larger synthetic sock. On our hands, we are going to wear underneath those mittens that we're going to loan you, you're going to want to have a pair of liner gloves. Again, these are going to be either synthetic or wool, ideally something with a touch screen capable surface. And then on your head, as I said, we're providing a hat and a gaiter, though we suggest that you bring one or more of your own as well. And if you would also like to add an additional layer there, you could also think about adding a balaclava or other things that you can get if you're traveling, especially in the earlier part of the season. If you have especially sensitive skin, you can get neoprene masks that go over your full face. And on top of that, we have the hood that can be used as well. So if it's sounding a little bit daunting, all of our expedition leaders are very, very well equipped to help you with this and to talk you through what the best choices are for each day. Now, I am going to talk a little bit more about additional packing, but I also wanted to point out that in your pre-departure briefing, which you will have either received as a paper copy or as an electronic copy, your checklist of packing materials is in there as well. And I strongly suggest that you consult that as you pack, as right now I'm going to be talking through some of the highlights of what to pack. So this is what we suggest that you bring as a list of personal items that I personally wouldn't want to forget before I come. So, like I said, there are more things listed in the PDB. You should look at that as well. I haven't written down pajamas here, for example, but the PDB definitely has pajamas as a thing that you can check off. But I just wanted to highlight some really important things that really shouldn't be forgotten. Indoor shoes, we are going to have those boots for you, but you won't necessarily want to wear big winter boots to supper or perhaps out to see a presentation. So either indoor shoes or slippers would both be appropriate for either of those scenarios. Just something comfortable and warm to put on your feet to walk around the hotel and the restaurants in. I mentioned already a down jacket or another mid-layer jacket, such as a puffy jacket. I did mention as well those glove liners, preferably with touchscreen sensitive panels on them. You will want to test those touchscreen panels with your particular phone as it is set up before committing to them. Warm hat and face covering, already mentioned, sock layers and long underwear as well. Now, something I do want to address is comfortable pants and shirts for layering. Now, when we're out, we are almost always going to be wearing our ski pants and our jacket if we're spending time outside. And I see a lot of folks coming with things like jeans and corduroy pants and things that are, normal and appropriate for going out for dinner, things like that. But they're really not going to be that comfortable for wearing underneath a pair of ski pants. I, for example, have a really thick pair of fleece pants that I wear as my mid-layer on my legs. And with that, I don't have, a big waistband that I'm trying to make comfortable with those ski pants as well. By all means, bring a pair of jeans or a pair of corduroy pants for suppers, but they're not going to be what you want to wear underneath those snow pants. For sunglasses and ski goggles, we will be outside at night and we will be outside during the day. And when it is sunny and it is snowy, you get a tremendous amount of reflection off that snow. So we want to make sure that you've got some kind of eye protection for those sunny days in the winter. And these might be prescription sunglasses, they might be just sunglasses that you add on. They could even be ski goggles that are tinted. Any of those things will work for the daytime. Some people also find it useful to bring a pair of untinted ski goggles for the nighttime so you've got something to put over your face in the event that it's really cold, but you still want to see the northern lights without tinted ski goggles in your way. Now, I have a note here about contact lenses. Now, I know that not everybody needs glasses or needs contacts, but if you are a glasses wearer and you have the option to move to contact lenses or to bring contact lenses with you, I do strongly, strongly advise that you throw a few pairs in your bag. The reason being that even with the best moisture management that we can do, you are still going to experience fogging up and icing up of your glasses under the conditions that we work in. It won't happen all the time, but it'll probably happen when you least want it to happen. And contacts are the easiest way around that. If that is not an option for you, I would consider prescription ski goggles as a backup. There are places that you can order those online, and you can have the lenses inserted directly into the ski goggles. But most people find that even with regular glasses, with ski goggles on top of them, in the Churchill nighttime conditions, we'll still experience some icing up. So the more we can do to move away from the traditional glasses, the better. Now, it's not to say that glasses won't work for you at all. I'm a glasses wearer. I bring my glasses with me. I just experience frequent fogging and have to clean them and have to do a lot of management of glasses. And this can be frustrating if you're also trying to juggle your camera and your smartphone and other things. So if it is an option to use contacts, that would just be my advice. I want to mention moisturizer and sunscreen, two things that you might not think about for Churchill. Sunscreen, not so much necessary for our January trips, but by the time we start getting into March, you're going to start to get a lot of solar rays, again, bouncing off that snow. And because the sun is higher at that point, we actually start to get people having sunburns in late March. So sunscreen is a great option at that point, not really necessary before our March trips, but moisturizer is always going to be necessary. Churchill is incredibly dry in the winter. This is what we look for, and it produces fewer clouds and more ability to view northern lights, but it does make our skin and our lips really dry. So bringing some moisturizer and Vaseline with you will be very helpful. Headlamps, you're going to see in the pre-departure briefing as a recommendation. I would strongly, strongly recommend that you have a rechargeable headlamp because you're going to want to plug that in every day with a red light setting. Red lights allow our eyes to stay adapted to nighttime conditions. And if you have a white light on your headlamp, not only are you going to be removing your ability to see at night, you're going to remove the ability of everybody else around you as well. So red lights, if at all possible, are really, really appreciated. And the last thing I have on my don't forget list is a battery bank. A lot of locations that we go to don't have any ability to plug in to recharge your phone, and phones are notorious for dying quickly in the cold. So if you bring a little portable battery bank with you, you'll always have it with you and available to recharge. So let's talk about packing specifically for photography for a minute. And again, there's so much information in your pre-departure briefing that I'm going to go over this relatively quickly. But I want to highlight one of the best things you can pack for photography, which is just your smartphone. I put this image up here not because I think it's the best picture I ever took of the Northern Lights. You can see it's behind the clouds here, though I still think it's pretty. But I took this just kind of by putting my smartphone up and taking a picture and going, oh, that looks all right. So all of the Samsung's S10s and newer, iPhones 11 and newer, and the Google Pixel 3 and newer can take nighttime photography, including photos of the Northern Lights. Generally, the newer they are, the better that works. But from that point onwards that I mentioned, your phone should be able to do that nighttime photography mode and get you images of the Northern Lights just using a handheld phone. So that's pretty cool. If you are going on a photo trip or you're interested in bringing your, good colleague of mine calls this her big girl camera. If you're going to bring a big girl or big boy camera with you, that's good too. We have lots of options for that. You may be aware that we offer photo specific trips, but even on our non-photo specific trips, we're able to help you out with your photography as well. So regarding tripods, do you need to bring your own tripod? If you are on one of our photo itineraries, you are guaranteed the use of a tripod the entirety of your trip. If you are traveling on one of our non-photo specific trips, we will have a number of tripods available for those trips. But if you want guaranteed exclusive use of a tripod on a non-photo trip, please bring your own because we are going to be sharing tripods on those trips. I would suggest 2 lenses, a nice wide angle lens and a nice variety of a zoom / telephoto lens there. We're going to be taking, you'll want wide angle for the northern lights. And then for daytime things, there's a potential for seeing some wildlife, which I'll talk about in a bit. So a telephoto lens that has a nice range to it will be a good option for you. Definitely bring lens cleaner as well as some microfiber cloth and extra batteries, just like with your smartphones. Batteries are notorious for dying in the cold, and you'll want, I would suggest, at least 3 batteries, if not 4, to get you through some of these nights, especially if you are traveling with one of the newer mirrorless cameras. The batteries on those cameras are, I mean, they're great. The cameras are fantastic, but they do run through them very quickly. With that, bring a battery charger for those batteries so you can recharge them every night. Bring extra memory cards. Bring something to put your camera into, like a camera case. And you'll see in the pre-departure briefing, we suggest bringing something like a dry bag as well to help with moisture management of the camera. Make sure that all your lenses have lens caps. You might even want to bring an extra one for each lens. And if you're planning on doing some daytime photography, a polarizing filter can be useful for those very sunny days where you have a lot of light reflecting off the snow. Okay, so that's a lot of information about packing. Let's move on. So you've arrived in Winnipeg, you've been transferred to the hotel, you've gone to your gear pickup, you've got all your loaner gear, you've met with your guide, you've asked your guide all sorts of questions about cameras. What happens next? Well, after your welcome dinner and hopefully a good sleep, our next morning is a flight to Churchill. And we are flying with our travel partner, Calm Air, on all our flights. The flight is about a 650-mile direct flight on a charter plane. The flight takes between 2 and 2.5 hours, depending on the wind. And we will have more than one group traveling at the same time, which is why that plane looks so big. In terms of luggage restrictions, for your checked bag, the restriction is 50 pounds of weight. For your carry-on bag, you can take one carry-on bag, maximum 20 pounds, with a maximum size of 10 by 16 by 12 inches. And again, all of that information is also in your PDB. Now, if you are planning on traveling with a large camera, for example, with multiple lenses, and you're saying, what am I supposed to do? My camera bag is larger than that, and it's heavier than that. We do understand that those traveling with camera gear will likely exceed that 20-pound weight restriction or the size restriction, and we have arranged for special handling of those items in a separate cargo compartment at the back of the plane. Anything larger than that size that I gave you or heavier than 20 pounds cannot travel with you on the plane in like underneath the seat due to Transport Canada regulations. So they will go in that separate compartment at the back of the plane, and you'll be reunited with that camera gear as soon as you arrive in Churchill. If you have excess items that you don't want to take with you up to Churchill, you are welcome to store them at the Fort Garry Hotel while you are in Churchill. Now, this next image is obviously not in the winter, but this was a very exciting day for us in Winnipeg when we got a new loading ramp to get on the plane. So that's why this image exists. This is how you're going to load onto the plane. So we go on a bus directly onto the tarmac, and from the bus you step down and then directly onto the ramp that leads up to the plane. So it is a very easy loading process for sure. Like I said, the plane's going to have multiple groups on it. It will be a fairly full flight, which gives us the option to do to have the greatest efficiency in our travel. Now, when we arrive in Churchill, those other groups will scatter to their own buses, because once we're there, we divide up, and we're going to meet up with our driver in Churchill. All of our groups will have their own separate bus provided by our travel partner, Great White Bear, and each of us have a specific driver as well. And in all likelihood, you probably won't see those other groups until we're back at the airport some days later. Now, most of the time, you're going to be in a bus that looks pretty similar to this. They're 24-passenger buses, which gives our 14-passenger trips lots of extra space for all that gear that you're carrying. On one day, we are going to be in the snowcoach, which, as you can see, is a much higher, bigger bus that will take us into a remote forest cabin area, and we're also going there one night for viewing. We'll have to take this big snow coach to access those areas. When we're in town, we are going to be overnighting at one of several hotels that we have there. We like to share our business with our various partners. This here is an example of a typical room in Churchill. They're warm, they're comfortable, they're clean. Sometimes I get asked about how warm are the hotels. Well, no matter which space you're in within the town of Churchill, unfortunately, a lot of the construction was done back in the 70s when we weren't so good at adding insulation to places. So it doesn't mean that the rooms are cold, but what it means is that places might be hot, for example, if you're far away from a door, or they might be cooler if you're closer to a door, because that level of insulation simply isn't there. And that's really common whether you're in a restaurant or a hotel or a presentation space. So that concept of layering, we're going to bring into our indoor spaces as well, and just having our sweaters available if it's cold, and taking our sweaters off if we're sitting next to a heater. Now we're going to have food available for you, of course, because this is Natural Habitat Adventures. We are able to accommodate most standard dietary needs, but because we are going into a remote area, it's really important that we know of any dietary restrictions well in advance of your trip. And you are able to communicate those dietary requirements either through going into your NatHab portal and filling out the section on dietary requirements and dietary restrictions, for example, for allergies, or by calling in and talking to your adventure specialist, especially if you have specific questions about your dietary needs. Now, we want you properly and safely fed. There may be a little bit less variety and fewer options that you're used to, because getting fresh produce to a remote town in the winter is very challenging, but there will always be food and it will always be very hearty. Okay, so we've talked a little bit of accommodation, we've talked about packing, we've talked about meals, but I want to talk about some of the more exciting things to me, which would be our activities that we're going to be doing in Churchill. Now, something to note around our activities is that all activities, daytime, nighttime, anything, they're all optional. It is your trip, and we all want your trip to be the best trip for you. So if you've been up late the night before and want to sleep in and miss breakfast, absolutely fine. If you want to have a longer nap after lunch and skip a presentation, that is also absolutely fine. Everybody is always welcome to join every activity, but we don't expect that every activity is going to speak to everyone. Some of the things that might be available to you are snowshoeing, which is one of my very, very favorite things to do anywhere that I am. We do like to get outside a lot during the day. I think for many of us, winter is our favorite season. So we really like to get outside and play in the snow and do all we can to really enjoy winter. Because for people who don't live in the cold, winter is something really unique and special all by itself. And we have ways of playing and existing in the cold and with the snow that perhaps you've never seen before. And we'd love to do that with you and teach you how it all works. Outside activities aren't the only things that we do in the day, though. We have indoor activities as well. For example, the Sanitak Museum, which is an Inuit art and culture museum located in Churchill. It's going to be a place that we can visit. Churchill also has a surprising amount of public art that can be seen and visited. We might choose to go for a walk around town and look at this art. We might choose to go for a ride, depending how we're feeling and how the weather's going, but there is a lot to see. We're going to have presentations with local folk as well and really get a chance to have conversations with people who spend their lives in Churchill. And we're also happy to include an introductory dog sledding adventure on all our trips as well. And dogs are often the favorite people of many of us here at NatHab and our guests as well. But aside from the dogs, there might be other animals you can spot in the Churchill region as well. Arctic hare is a fun one to spot in the winter and often a very difficult one to spot. You can see how it really would blend in with the snow from not too far away. So this is one of the animals that can still be visible in the winter if we spend some time looking for it and get lucky. Uh, this lovely bird here is a raven, one of the very few birds to overwinter in the Churchill area. Next bird here is a Canada jay. They're very friendly little guys, and they spend a lot of time with people. Kind of one of their defining characteristics, and we'll hopefully see them too. Churchill is also well known for its fox populations, and if you say, well, I've got foxes where I am, well, yep, that's cool too, but in Churchill, you might have the chance of seeing other color morphs of foxes. This here is a silver fox. Silver foxes are actually a color morph of the red fox, which comes in a number of different color variations, a few of which can be found in Churchill. And of course, there might be a potential to see Arctic fox as well, but we just never know what we're going to see wildlife-wise. Willow ptarmigan coming up next here are extraordinarily difficult to spot, and if you find them, you can be very, very proud of yourself. They blend in very well with the snow and like to hide within the willows. Regarding our nighttime activities, we are going to have 4 viewing nights in Churchill on each trip, and each night is going to have a different viewing location, just to give ourselves some variety and different places to try things out. One of these locations we call the Aurora Domes. So this is a building that we'll talk about the history of when we're up in Churchill. It's part of an old rocket range, but you can see on top of the building 2 domes there. Those domes are viewing areas for sitting indoors and watching the lights comfortably inside. Below those domes, there's actually a whole sitting area where we can spend some time if the lights don't come out right away. Another location here, this is the forest cabin I was talking about. So this is one that we actually take that snow coach into the woods and down a frozen creek to get to this cabin. And it's a beautiful, warm, cozy cabin. We'll have a fire going outside. And this is one of the locations where we're going to be doing outdoor viewing because there isn't a dome, for example, at this location. But it's lovely and sheltered with all these big trees from any wind that might be around. It's a gorgeous location. This one here is the Aurora Pod, and the pod here, I know it's a dark image because it was a dark night. You can see the pod almost looks like a rail car, and there are seats within that pod as well as a wood pellet stove to keep you nice and cozy, and the ceiling is all glass, so you've got great viewing both from inside and outside that pod. So that's 3 of our locations. The 4th location is actually the first image I had on the slide deck, and it was the teepee, which is located at the dog yard that we're going to be visiting one day. So it's also fun because you get to meet the people who do the dog mushing, and then you're there at nights, and it's a lot of fun. And each location has its own uniqueness to it, and we all really enjoy the locations. So with that, I really want to make sure that I allow lots of time for questions. So I'm going to hand things back over to Rob right now for any questions that have come in.
All right, thank you very much, Eleanor. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, let's get to some of these questions. So, yeah, I know you loan items out when we come on the trip. Are these brand new items? Are these cleaned items? Or are they going to be safe to use?
Yeah, what a great question, and thank you for that. So some of these items might well be brand new because we're always going through an audit process of our gear and replacing anything that needs replacement. However, a lot of these have been used either earlier this season or possibly in a previous season. Everything is sanitized between uses, so they're absolutely safe to use. And you'll see that, in fact, a lot of the guides will be using the same things as well. So they're good pieces of gear, and they've been selected through a lot of years of experience on the ground working in Churchill. So we are very confident in our boots and our parkas and the advice that we are providing in terms of what other gear you should be bringing to complement that loaner gear.
Great, thank you for addressing that. We appreciate it. So, do you provide walking poles if I'm going snowshoeing or just need them?
Thank you for that question as well. So walking poles are something that if you find that they are necessary for your stability in daily use, for example, if you find walking poles helpful when going for a walk around the neighborhood or on a fairly flat trail, I would advise that you bring your own set with you because you'll be using them frequently and they'll be most comfortable for you. When it comes to occasional use of poles, like you're just wondering about using them while snowshoeing, we do have poles available for snowshoeing. And if you prefer that, then by all means, we can have those around. I find, and a lot of our expedition leaders find that if you are snowshoeing for the first time, poles might be a hindrance rather than a help because they turn a new activity into two new activities. So we might advise when you're out there that you try it with just your snowshoes before grabbing a set of poles, but we can absolutely have poles available for you if you find that to be the most comfortable and easiest way to walk with snowshoes.
Great, thank you for addressing that. Uh, so let's get back to the loaner items for just 1 second. People are asking, how does that get transported? Are we bringing that on the plane or do we get that when we arrive?
Okay, so all of that loaner gear, it's stored at the Fort Garry Hotel. So when you arrive in Winnipeg and you meet with your arrivals specialist at the airport or at the Fort Garry Hotel, if you, for example, are arriving in the dead of winter and you say to yourself, oh my gosh, it's cold, I need a jacket right away, that's something that you could pick up right away at arrival time, as opposed to waiting for that gear pickup time. Because we are going to be doing all the gear pickup in Winnipeg and then transporting that gear with us up to Churchill. And that way we are sure that you have the appropriate gear right away. Because when we deplane in Churchill, you probably noticed in that image, despite the fact that it was me in the summer, that there was outdoor walking required to move from the plane to any form of transport. And if you were getting off the plane and it's negative 35 outside, you will need your parka and a sweater and a hat and possibly other things right away, and certainly your boots. So a lot of the transportation might be occurring on your body as we go up to Churchill. At your welcome dinner on night one, your guide's going to go through some advice about how you should dress for the next day. And what I would usually say, depending a little bit on the weather, is that on the plane, you're going to wear the boots that we've loaned you. You're going to wear the sweater that we've loaned you. You're going to bring or wear the parka that we've loaned you, and that can always be put in an overhead bin if you're too hot on the plane. And then things like your snow pants, any heat packs that you might want with you, your gaiter or a balaclava, that can always be shoved in your suitcase to be met up with later. But you're actually going to be bringing off a lot of it on the plane with you so that that walk from the plane into the terminal and then onto the bus isn't too cold or unsafely cold.
So if we fall in love with the parka or any of the gear that is loaned, is it available for purchase?
Yeah, so all of our gear, unfortunately, the stuff that we have, we're going to have to keep with us to get through the rest of the season. Some things are available on our gear shop. For example, the sweater that we're going to loan you, that fleece sweater, I think it's a pretty great fleece sweater. I have my own, and that is available for purchase through the gear shop. And that way you might have a choice of color or sizing. You can get that way. Our parkas are not available for purchase. Those are things that we keep on site for our use only, unfortunately. But things like the hat, the gaiter, and the sweater, you can purchase through our gear shop. And then if you fall in love with the mittens that we use, it is actually a Winnipeg made mitten that you can order online, and we can teach you where to get it because all Manitobans and Winnipeggers absolutely swear by these mittens, and they are available very few other spaces.
Do you recommend bringing yak tracks or the equivalent?
Yeah, so we do have kicking around in a box somewhere. I'm sure we can find a couple pairs of yak tracks. I say that they are kicking around in a box somewhere because honestly, we very, very rarely reach for them as guides. We find a couple of things with yak tracks. Firstly, is that if you're putting them on indoors, they become quite hazardously slippery when you are inside, which takes away from the whole point of the yak tracks of not falling. And it's going to be too cold outdoors to sit down and pull them on with your hands. That will not be a successful endeavor. When it's really cold, this is actually a really interesting phenomenon that you might encounter while you're up in Churchill. When it is really cold, ice and snow actually becomes less slippery. So while we are still going to be watching our step, you will certainly find that the snow and the ice is less hazardous to your footing than it is closer to the freezing point. It doesn't mean that you can't wipe out on ice, but it is much, much less slippery than you might be expecting. So my advice would be, if you'd like to bring your yak tracks and you're worried about slipping, you can certainly always ask your guide to help you put them on outdoors. But I think you'll find that overall, they're not as helpful to you as you might expect. If you would like a pair of loaner poles, for example, for some more stability, that might be a thing that you find more useful than bringing a set of yak tracks. So I hope that fully answers that question there.
Thank you very much for addressing that. So is the photography bag I bring, is that in addition to a carry-on bag or in lieu of a carry-on bag?
Yeah, the important thing here to note is that kind of no matter whether it has a camera in it or not, the size of your carry-on bag can only be so big. So if, for example, you have, like I do, a fairly pretty sizable camera bag, I am going to send that with our special cargo service and it rides in the back of the plane. I'm still going to bring a small carry-on bag with, my book and probably because I'm working my laptop. And I'm still able to bring that additional bag with me, but it has to be a smaller bag. It has to be, for example, the size of a small backpack or a handbag or a CPAP machine, something roughly that size. Whereas those bigger, what we would call, for example, like if you're on Delta or United or Air Canada, those full size carry-on bags, they are not going to ride with us in the plane. They're going to be in the back of the plane.
So one of our guests would like a little clarification. So are we going to be staying overnight at the viewing locations or do we return to the hotel every night?
Thank you for asking. We are going to be returning to the hotel every night. We're not going to make you sleep outside with the sled dogs. So we do stay out kind of until past the peak of lights activity, which tends to be around sometime between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. And your guide will go over all the details around how late we're out each night. And it depends on a number of factors. But we will be heading back to the hotels every night to sleep in a nice warm bed.
Would you say that an iPhone is adequate for taking photos or is there something else that we should bring?
So smartphones are a great tool for photography at this point in time, especially if they are a newer smartphone. Essentially, the rule with the smartphones is a little bit of the newer the better because the software it does get better each and every time and the sensors get better each and every time. But basically around the year 2019, most smartphones that were new that year started being able to capture northern lights. So I think I said if you have an iPhone 11 or 12, 13, 14, 15, you should be able to capture northern lights with that iPhone. If you have an iPhone 10 or older, like an iPhone 9 or 8, for example, there are some workarounds we can use with third-party apps but your iPhone will not inherently be able to take photos of the northern lights without us working on it.
So, do you have any tricks for carrying around my smartphone so that it doesn't freeze and the battery doesn't drain so quickly?
Yeah, we do this with a number of things. We do this with smartphones. We do this with any heat-sensitive medication. We call it body packing. So you're going to take, here's my smartphone. If I were carrying this with me, I have a little inside pocket. I'm going to tuck it in close to my body, and that's going to be where I keep it anytime that it's not in use. If you have your smartphone in an outside pocket of your jacket, it's going to get very, very cold, and that battery is going to die. Now, the good news about your smartphone battery dying is that when your phone warms back up, you'll have nearly the charge you had before it died. So it's not as if you drain it and it stays drained the remainder of the day. It just has to warm back up. So often we go through a number of cycles where your phone shuts off and you warm it back up, turn it back on, and then you're taking photos and your phone shuts off again and you have to go warm it back up. Now, having a battery pack can help mitigate this. So you usually keep the battery pack inside your body as well, keep it warm too. And you can keep your phone plugged in. It will be less likely to die in that case. But really, it's the cold more so than the battery that's causing the issue. So again, your guide's going to help you with all this advice too. And so much of it depends on what the conditions are that particular day. We've certainly had some nights, especially into March, where the temperatures have been quite mild, and I haven't had my phone die the whole night, which was a lovely surprise. But I will say that overall, the best thing we can do is keep it as warm as possible, as often as possible, and just know that at some point, if you're having it out, it will likely either stop being responsive or fully die on you, and you'll have to warm it back up.
So if I'm leaving my laptop home to keep my load a little bit lighter, will there be a computer accessible to help me do backups onto a portable hard drive or anything?
The answer to that would be generally no. However, especially for those photo trips, I know that our photo guides have certainly on occasion assisted in that matter to make sure that you've got your photos backed up onto a portable hard drive. If that's something that you're going to do, I would advise making sure that you have that portable hard drive with you, perhaps extra jump sticks or USB keys, things like that. But please keep in mind that each guide has a different computer, and our computers, for example, if you have a Mac or vice versa, they might not talk to each other as nicely as we'd like. So if you are, I understand the push to lighten your load, but if you are counting on doing backups, we just don't know what any particular guide is going to have for equipment. So I can't say 100% that they're going to be able to assist you with those backups. They certainly will try if they can. But if you want that guaranteed, I would plan on bringing your own laptop.
So how many expedition leaders will be on the trip? And is it different for a photo trip?
Yeah, so all of our trips have a maximum number of approximately 14 guests who will be traveling on them. And with that, we will have one expedition leader, such as myself, who will meet you in Winnipeg and travel up to Churchill and back with you. And then in Churchill, we're going to have another person called a field operations specialist. They are not an expedition leader. They provide logistics and operational support, but they're going to be with us a lot of the time as well. So if we're talking needing an extra set of hands to help you with something, wanting assistance down a ramp, anything like that, like we have great staff on site in Churchill who's able to be that extra set of hands, and they are fantastic within that role, and great people to work with. So you'll always have both the expedition leader and your field operations specialist available to you. Some trips may also have an expedition leader in training as well, who's going to be there to learn as well as help out. But in general, each trip only has a single EL, even whether or not they are a photo trip or a women's trip or a standard itinerary.
So, Eleanor, will there be hot drinks available? And if so, can I get a hot chocolate?
Oh my goodness, you bet there's going to be hot drinks available. And yes, you can have a hot chocolate, maybe even with marshmallows. We sure like providing hot beverages for people. We're going to have some lovely mugs for you to take with you and keep if you like. And every one of our viewing locations at night is going to be well stocked with warm, cozy beverages to make sure that we can come in from the cold and warm up as quickly as possible.
Well, that sounds great, Eleanor. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for some closing comments.
All right, well, thanks so much for joining us today, everybody. I hope that many of you are traveling with us this year, and I really look forward to seeing some of you in Winnipeg. It's going to be a great season with some wonderful people, and thanks again for being here today, and hopefully I've answered some questions for you in advance of your trip.
Eleanor, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.